It was a hot, sunny summer day in Town City. Not too hot, not too cold. Just right for a day at the beach, which is what Skallow and Joe were doing. Swimming, building sandcastles, and simply relaxing in the sun, getting their daily dose of vitamin D. While digging the moat for today's magnum opus sandcastle, Joe noticed something unexpected poking up from the sand. He quickly glanced around to see if anyone was about, before removing the object from the ground. Joe then inspected his discovery. It was an old glass square base liquor-like bottle, sealed with a water-swirled, partially chipped cork. Inside was a piece of what looked like paper that was rolled up and held together with a slightly worn piece of red ribbon tied in a bow. Joe hid his new discovery as best he could, as he carefully made his way over to Skallow to show him what he had found. "Look," Joe whispered as he huddled up against Skallow. Skallow investigated Joe's finding. "Wow," he exclaimed quietly. "Where did you find this?" "I was digging the moat for our sandcastle, when I saw something sticking up from the sand, so I dug it out and brought it here," Joe explained quietly. Skallow gave Joe back the bottle. Then he went to go get his towel and bag, carefully wrapping it in the towel and delicately lowering it into the bag, before placing it in his car, while Joe packed everything else. They both got in and drove back to Skallow's place to continue their investigation in a less secret way. Arriving at their destination, Skallow and Joe transported their prize into the garage before privatising the area. Skallow switched on his work light and unearthed the subject, placing it on his workbench. He scanned the room for his partner and spotted him changing in the corner. "Get over here," Skallow playfully scolded. "Coming," Joe replied as he put his jacket on. He hurried over to join Skallow and the two began operating on their patient. Skallow asked Joe to firmly hold the bottle with its neck pointing towards the ceiling. Skallow then took a long screw and with a screwdriver screwed it into the cork up to its last inch. Next he took his hammer and hooked it under the screw, slowly pulling the cork out with the hammer's backside. To finish the job, Joe turned the bottle onto its side, and Skallow tactfully removed the target with a pair of tweezers and delicately laid it on the bench. He then slipped on a clean pair of gloves, gently undid the ribbon, and rolled the object out, revealing its secret. It was a map, a treasure map. As the pair expected, the map was old, hence their inability to recognize the treasure's location at a glance within their contemporary world. They studied and discussed its whereabouts for a good solid hour, maybe two, before deciding to consult some help. "This is impossible," exclaimed Joe in frustration. "We've been trying for hours now and still nothing." "You're right," Skallow sighed. "We need some help." Concerned, Joe asked, "Are you sure you want to tell anyone about this? Shouldn't this be our secret?" Skallow replied reassuringly, "It won't remain a secret. We can't hide it forever. Like you said, we can't even find the treasure. Leaving this is our only real option." Understandably but disheartened, Joe agreed. Skallow continued, "I'm not suggesting anyone. I'm suggesting someone we know and trust." "Who?" Joe questioned. "Major Nick." Skallow returned the map to its bottle and sealed the opening with newspaper and tape. He placed it in his bag and transported their prize across the street to their friends, Major Nick Thompson and the bodyguard. On arrival, they were greeted and invited in by Thompson. He and the others asked about their day out, also inquiring about the content of Skallow's bag. Joe explained by telling them about the discovery he found on the beach. Skallow added that they would like Nick to help with the investigation. Nick agreed. He took the map, laid it out on the dining table and looked it over quietly. He then went upstairs and returned with a large book, which he used to help with his research. After a while he came to his conclusion. "I've got it," declared Major Nick. "Come have a look." Everyone came to see what he had uncovered. Nick explained that by using this book full of maps and relevant documents in conjunction with Joe's map helped him to conclude the treasure's location as in front of the big oak tree in Skallow's backyard. Surprised but puzzled, Skallow questioned, "You're telling me that there's been buried treasure right under my nose and feet all these years and I haven't known about it?" How can that be? I could be wrong, confessed Major Nick, but it's the only lead we have, so I suggest we follow it. With this new information, they set off to see if Nick's theory was right. On their journey, the bodyguard equipped the shovel, and Skallow did the same. The two yielding shovels began digging when they arrived at the precise location marked on Joe's map. Robo helped as well. After digging for some time, the bodyguard's shovel struck something solid. Found it, I think, uttered the bodyguard. Everyone stopped and joined him. He and Skallow unearthed the object and lifted it out of the hole. After cleaning some of the dirt off, they saw an old wooden chest, locked with an old metal lock. Could it be the treasure? Remarked Thompson. It sure could be, answered the bodyguard. It must be, argued Joe. It looks like every treasure chest I've ever seen. I think you're right, agreed Major Nick. To be honest, I didn't think we'd actually find anything. Why's that? You were so sure before, questioned Skallow. I've never heard or seen anyone find a real treasure chest through a map before, but I guess there's a first for everything, replied Major Nick. Looks or not, it must have something in it. It weighed a ton getting it out, remarked the bodyguard. Now they had to decide what to do with the treasure chest. Joe and the bodyguard took one stance, Skallow and Major Nick took another. Thompson was undecided. Both sides stated their case. Joe and the bodyguard argued that the chest should be opened now and potentially kept, seeing it as theirs. Skallow first reminded Joe of their previous conversation. Then he and Major Nick argued that this shouldn't be kept a secret. It's history and should be preserved in a museum. Thompson thought for a moment, then decided that Skallow and Major Nick were right, saying, "It's not right to keep this for ourselves. Others deserve to see this too. Also, I'm sure the museum will want to open the chest to see if it's real or not." Thompson's speech made Joe and the bodyguard realise that they were wrong, and agreed to do it their way. Following this debate, Major Nick went off home, returning with his pickup truck. They all helped load and secure the chest into the cargo bay, and covered it with a sheet of tarpaulin. They all got in and set off. They arrived at Town City's National Museum, and Major Nick asked everyone else to wait in the truck until he returned. When he came back, Nick told them that the museum was very interested in the chest and to go see the museum's chief professor, Dr. Alexandra Atlas, about it. Nick drove his truck to the museum's rear, and they helped load the chest onto a trolley and wheeled it to Atlas's office. Dr. Atlas welcomed the five in with their discovery, and they lifted it onto her desk. Atlas put on her gloves and firstly examined the chest lock, then collected some tools before working and successfully opening the lock. She invited them round to share in the unveiling. Inside were jewels of many kinds, jewellery of all types, and an uncountable amount of gold coins. Dr. Atlas took one coin and investigated it under her microscope. Completing some additional tests, concluded it was authentic. "How did you acquire this artifact?" inquired Dr. Atlas. "I found a bottle containing a map on Shore Cove. We followed it and found this treasure buried in my friend's backyard," explained Joe. "Interesting. Whereabouts on Shore Cove did you find it?" Dr. Atlas questioned as she placed a map of Town City on her desk. Joe pointed to the location. "And the treasure?" Atlas continued. Joe pointed to that location on the map. Dr. Atlas marked both and searched them on her computer. "Exactly as I thought," Atlas stated. "Let me explain." Atlas told them the story of the pirate captain Rufus the Runt, who in late 1675 arrived on the coast of what would become Town City many generations later, carrying on board his ship, the Blue Whale, a chest full of jewels, jewellery, and thousands of gold coins, which Rufus and his crew planned to bury on this uncharted land. Rufus sees a small oak tree all alone, close to the shore, and decides, that's the one. So his crew went and buried it. The Blue Whale then sailed off back to sea. A few years later, the Blue Whale was defeated and sunk in battle, with Rufus and crew perishing as a result. For centuries, historians, scientists, and archaeologists have searched for the treasure, but now it has been found, concluded Dr. Atlas. The discovery of Rufus the Runch treasure caused a massive rift in the world of history, archaeology, and science. The media also caught wind as well, leading Town City's premier news anchor John Ernest, who conducted an investigation into the event. A few days after the discovery, John Ernest's report aired on the 6 o'clock news. He began by introducing the topic, then moved into his interview of Dr. Atlas. The aloofness of Rufus the Runch treasure led many experts worldwide to conduct that it was permanently lost. However, this discovery indicates the possibility of finding other undiscovered treasures that could be out there. Afterwards, the report panned to Joe and friends, who retold and discussed their story in more depth. The interviews ended with a return to Dr. Atlas, with John Ernest asking her how the bottle came to the beach. Atlas explained, "My theory is that the mat was stored in the bottle and kept somewhere on board. Sometime after Rufus's ship sank in 1678, the bottle floated out of the wreck and over the centuries drifted its way here. Due to the changes in tides and changes in the land, caused the bottle to bury itself underground until now." John Ernest rounded off his report with a few final comments, and it transitioned into the next story. 3 individuals were also watching the report, but instead of being impressed and amazed like everyone else, saw it as an opportunity for mischief and greed. They were Scorpio, Strangles, and the Wizard of Doom, 3 who had given Skallow and Joe trouble in the past. After the report, the Wizard of Doom switched off the telly, and with the others hatched a plan to steal the treasure. A week had passed since the discovery of Rufus the Runch treasure, and Skallow, Joe, and friends and the rest of Town City were still buzzing from its unearthing. People from around the globe were also captivated, travelling in their masses to see it. Unfortunately, a breaking news headline surfaced that evening, with John Ernest regrettably reporting that Rufus the Runch treasure had been stolen. John Ernest continued his report by analysing the case. The crime occurred the night before this report at around 9 o'clock, 3 hours after the museum closed. No damage to either the museum building or any other artefacts had been discovered. No other artifact had been touched or stolen apart from the one in question. The only piece of evidence acquired was a note left at the scene. It read, "If you want your artifact back, come alone to the place where one gets milk, bread and a quick snack. Next to the green dumpster at the building's rear is where your artifact is at," and was signed with the initials WOD. John Ernest concluded the report by stating that no group or individual was linked to the case, with it stumping security and police, and would update viewers if any developments were made. Although everyone else was lost to the criminal's identity, Skallow and Joe knew exactly who did it. After the report, Skallow switched off the telly. He and Joe testified their case to Major Nick Thompson and the bodyguard. After seeing the report and hearing Skallow and Joe's explanation, agreed. They're all now on a mission to recover Rufus the Runch treasure.